Well, hello there, fellow geeks and geekettes. Welcome to another video. Now, today I want to talk about something that people will always talk about, even though many folks are saying that the comic books are dying and that they are driving towards a direction that means a total annihilation. Now, even if DC Comics was totally eradicated, followed by Marvel, Dark Horse, Image, IDW, Boom, and so on and so forth, comic books will not die. They will never die. We will always have collected editions and back issues. We will always have reprints, I hope, of the best of the best of the comic book, stories. Now, it's the same thing as with every kind of literature that was written in the past and is not written nowadays. It's still read by, well, sometimes a lot of people, sometimes fewer people, but that doesn't matter. The fact is that during the roughly 80 years long history of the publishing of the American comic books, we have such a huge backlog that even if we read every day, all day, we wouldn't be able to read all the comic books that we want to read, until death. So that's that. So a lot of people are still asking, where should I start? Because there are still new readers, right? Every year, every week, every day, there are people who would like to get into comic books and read them. Now, some people think that it's quite complex, given the fact that now we are only talking about the American comic books, given the fact that we've got the aforementioned 80 years history of publishing the American comic books. Say somebody wants to read the X-Men. Where do I start? Do I start with issue 1 of X-Men, or do I start with the Uncanny X-Men, as it was renamed then? Do I start with the Giant Size X-Men? Do I start with Jim Lee's adjectiveless X-Men from the 1990s? Do I start with Grant Morrison's New X-Men, or the Astonishing X-Men by Joss Whedon? Or do I start with the House of X and Paths of M, right? House of X and Paths of 10 by Jonathan Hickman. Well, let me tell you something. If you want to read a comic book, if you want to start reading comic books, go to the internet, do a little bit of internet research, and find something that you find interesting, interestingly looking and sounding. Find a comic book, a comic story that you will consider to be worth reading, that will please your eyes as far as the visual aspect goes, and it will intrigue your curiosity, that you will want to know more about the characters, and you will want to know more about the particular story. Now, when I was a kid, I started reading comics when I was about 3 or 4 years old. So one of my first comic books was a Spider-Man comic book, a Spider-Man issue. Then I was reading comic books for a long time, and then I stopped for a bit when I reached puberty. Because I don't know for what reason, but a lot of people stop reading comics when they reach puberty, and they shift their focus somewhere else to boys and girls, and I don't really know why, because comic books are obviously better than relationships between people. And then thankfully I got back into comics. What was it? We've got, is there a year? Some 12 years ago, I got back into comics, and I've been voraciously reading and rereading since. Of course, plus regular literature and poetry, and more recently manga. So there's a lot, and I've got a reading material until the day I die. And still, I hope that in the afterlife, if there is one, there's a huge library with everything that I want to read, so I can actually read it all. But what brought me back into comics was something that I didn't really that not many people would suggest. That would be an ideal thing for a beginner to start with, as far as reading comic books go. I grabbed the Brightest Day event or crossover maxi series by Geoff Johns, right? I mean, it's not even one of the better crossovers events of DC Comics, but I just did. I liked the covers. Very simply, there's no other reason to that. I liked the covers. They were very colorful. They contained a lot of characters that I knew at the time already and that I liked. So I started. And I enjoyed the story, and I said to myself, all right, quite obviously, there is something more to it. There is an entire history behind this, and I need to catch up. So this comic book, I liked it, but what's more important, it made me feel interested in the stories that came before. So I grabbed Blackest Night. And that, my friends, that's now the true comic book that brought me back into comics some 11 or 12 years ago, because this, to this day, Blackest Night is my favorite story by DC Comics. Not only is it my favorite crossover, not only is it my favorite event, not only is it my favorite Green Lantern oriented story, but it is quite honestly my very top favorite comic book of all time. And that I know, I do admit that I do realize that a lot of this, me loving this book might be caused by the nostalgia that I still feel for this comic book. It being that comic that brought me back into reading comics the 12 years ago. But I don't care. I still love it. I have all these single issues. I've got the hardcover that came back. Then I've got a paperback that was later published, and I finally decided to upgrade to my already triple or quadruple dip to the omnibus of the 10th anniversary Blackest Night release of the Blackest Night story, because it being my favorite comic book, I just need to have it in the best format possible. And from then I got everywhere else, right? Because even for Blackest Night you need to read a lot. You ideally you need to read the entire Green Lantern run by Geoff Johns, and for that, or this will lead you to reading other comics like Final Crisis, and from Final Crisis you will get to Grant Morrison's Batman, and it's like a web of great comics that you will get to when you start somewhere. So just go blind, just point a finger to some comics, just read it. You don't like it, all right, just put it away, give it away, sell it, read another comics. You like that comics, all right, and then go from there and go crazy, right? So, and that's only DC. Now getting into Marvel is another question, right? Or the independent comics. So yeah, that's my suggestion. If you want to start reading comic books, you've never read a comic book, just do a little internet research and find what you think will be interesting. Doesn't matter if it's the cover, if it's the interior art, if it's the synopsis, you find the story synopsis interesting, if the name of the writer rings a bell, because nowadays a lot of writers, or comic book writers are worldwide famous, not only among comic book fans, such as Frank Miller, Neil Gaiman. He's also a famous, not saying great, but he's famous novelist, right? Geoff Johns. A lot of these writers have also become like screenwriters for TV shows and movies. So do that, and then you are on your own journey, my friends. So let me know if your experience was similar or the same. Let me know if this video helped you in any way, or if you see this video in like 5 or 10 years, if there's still YouTube in 10 years. If you find this video 10 years after this was made, and you followed my advice, what was the result of your journey? Tell me. Anything really that you would like to share or ask me, just put it down in the comments down below, and I will be more than glad to answer. And yeah, that will be all. Do not forget to subscribe to this shitty, unimportant channel, my friends, if you haven't done so already, or dislike this unimportant video if you don't like it, or like this video for some reason if you like it. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye, and keep reading.